What's up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be reviewing the Glycerin Max 2 by Brooks. Now I just reviewed the Glycerin Max first version a couple weeks ago, so this is very fresh to me. So I'm really excited to be able to come into this review with a pretty recent comparison to the first iteration of this shoe. So let's go ahead and get into it. I was very late to the game with trying the Glycerin Max, the original version. Of course, the reason I wanted to try that was because I knew that the second version was coming out pretty soon, and I want to be able to compare those two shoes together to be able to kind of give you a recommendation of which one is maybe a good fit for you. Now, from my understanding, there has not been that much that has changed in the shoe. However, it does weigh a tiny bit more, which, as you may know, sometimes is an issue for myself. Now, I don't love heavier shoes, but for the use case for the shoe, it may be okay. See anything here? Yeah, we're matching. That was not planned. No, I of course had to pick one of the neutral colorways in this shoe, but I was feeling a little spicy. I wanted something a teeny bit different than what I normally go for. So we selected a neutral that has a tiny bit of color here, but I love this color. It's so pretty. They have 3 different colorways for the men and 3 different colorways for the women. So I'm gonna go ahead and dive into this shoe and talk all about the different specs and then speak on a few different changes that have been made to this shoe compared to the first version if you've tried that. Now, if you wanted to get your hands on the first version, I will say it's going to be pretty difficult. They are on sale pretty much everywhere that they are sold, if you can even find them, or if you can even find your size. It's pretty much going to be just the second version. Similar to the first version, this is a neutral shoe. And because it is a max cushion shoe, I think there's going to be some added stability elements incorporated naturally here. Right off the bat, like looking at this, the foam already looks quite a bit different than the first one. I really liked the way the first one looked. I thought the foam looked sweet. It kind of looked a little bit badass, just the way, and maybe it was partially due to the colorway I selected. I love that colorway. But I felt that the foam looked really cool. Now, if you've seen that, you probably have an idea of what I'm talking about there. But this one looks a little unusual to me, not necessarily bad. I don't really care that much. More or less, I'm surprised they made the change here because I felt like the first one did look so cool, but I'll go ahead and show you up close so you can get an idea. So it's interesting because this does have that nitrogen infused DNA cell foam here, similar to the first one, but it's almost like this weird gated, you can't see those like infused cells is I guess kind of what I'm talking about here. Whereas before you could kind of see the different almost bubbles, if you will, of what was pumped into the foam. And here you cannot. It is definitely more of a traditional looking foam in the forefoot area, but at the back it's like gated. It's interesting, but you can kind of see through. I'm interested to see if this has any impact on performance, just the slight structural change here. It's almost like some airways that are broken apart from the foam to the outside of the shoe. I'm not sure if I'm doing that any justice, but you can kind of see here what I'm talking about. Like those are open slots that lead into the inside of the foam. So not really sure. I'm curious to see how that kind of feels. Maybe you won't have any kind of noticeable impact there. The heel collar here seems like this is just refined just a slight bit here. I think this shoe overall looks a little less sporty than the first version, but it still is a really good looking shoe. This is very stable. It still has that similar flap situation that the previous version did have, so they didn't really change anything there. The mesh upper is where they've made the majority of the change. From everything I've seen so far, this is also still an engineered mesh upper, but this is supposed to be a little bit more flexible and breathable. So the improvements here are supposed to be, I don't know if that was like the most negative feedback from people who have tried this shoe, but just feeling this, I mean, this feels like a very high quality upper. Go ahead and show you that up close. Apologies that it is dark and gloomy out today, so it's gonna be a little hard to see. But yeah, this is a really cool looking upper. I think that that's gonna be pretty breathable. I don't think I'm gonna run into any issues with temperature here. Like I said, the weight has changed just a tiny bit. They did add a little bit more weight. Not totally sure where that's coming from because from my initial kind of gut reaction, the upper that was the largest change they made seems to be thinner and a little bit more flexible than the first version. I'm going to go ahead and say that probably the change in design of the foam overall is partially impacting the weight. It's the same foam. It is supposed to be a responsive foam, which we love. especially because this is an everyday running shoe. You are meant to be able to use this for longer distances or even recovery runs. It's supposed to be a solid walking shoe too, for those who prefer to walk instead of run. But again, I'm not really sure where the weight change has come from. Just gut reaction is it's gotta be this foam design here. The weight for a women's, what I believe is a size 8, I'm not seeing the actual size anywhere, is 10.2 ounces, and the men's size 9 is going to be 11.3 ounces. So we're in the double digits here. I did weigh my size 7 because I am a true US size 7, and it weighed 9.1 ounces. So that's where I'm a little hesitant to say definitively the weight that is reported on the website is associated with a size 8, because typically one size up is not over an ounce larger, at least from my experience. So it could also be a US size 9. That's why I wanted to weigh this, just to give you some sort of context here. It's either based off an 8 or a 9, but I just made it into the single digits. So I am happy for that, because I don't know how I feel about double digits running. I've done it and I don't love it. Even for recovery runs and long distance running in general, I still like something that's going to be able to feel like it's not weighing me down. This does have the glide roll rocker technology that it did have in the previous iteration too. I would say, honestly, I don't think it's necessarily more aggressive than the first one. If anything, without comparing them side by side right in this moment, I would say it's maybe less so. I'll be able to speak to that soon, but hopefully it's gonna give me some solid, strong toe off, even that I will be running at some of those slower paces. My plan is to be running maybe about 5 miles, which is usually the distance I try to shoe out with, and then kind of keeping in that more recovery run pace range. This does have a 6mm heel to toe drop, which is on the lower end of what I'm most comfortable with, but I'm excited about that. I think that's gonna feel nice overall. This shoe is supposed to be something that people are going to really enjoy, because it's going to have some of that softness with the foam composition here, but it's also not sacrificing on that push off that you really want to be able to sustain and keep going and enjoy your run for miles and miles. The shoe does come in at $200 US, so no price difference from the first version either. Alright everyone, it's time for me to take these out for a run. I will be reporting back soon on what my thoughts were and if I think these are a Thunderstruck shoe or not. Stay tuned. Alright everybody, I just got back from my run and I want to keep it real with you, because as you know, if you're a runner, not every run is going to be your best run, okay? Now, that is so hard to accept. I've been there and I'm sure you have as well. And it gets so frustrating when you have a run that just doesn't go how you anticipate it. Not due to the shoes, but I wanted to give you that little caveat, because honestly, some runs, regardless of the shoes, you just may not be feeling the way you would hope to have felt. Okay, I just got off of a 3-day work trip, so I not so debatably, had not eaten very healthily the past few days, and I'm certain that has contributed to how I felt on my run today, but needless to say, I did not quite get to 5 miles. I ran about 4.5. I was having side stitches left and right, and I could not get my breathing in a good rhythm, and then once that slippery slope starts, I feel like it's really hard to bounce back from. Now, I did compartmentalize that and separate that from how I felt in these shoes. I just wanted to give you the caveat and keep it real that this just wasn't a great run for me overall. And I am a little disappointed, but I mean, I didn't really have time to run at all the last few days. So it was kind of my first time back in probably 5 days, which is also okay. Breaks are good. But yeah, I could not get out of the side stitch cycle. I digress. But let's talk about the Glycerin Max too, because that's really what we're here to chat about today. Now, I know I said temperature-wise that I did not think I would have any issues because the upper feels pretty dialed in, and I still stand by that for the most part. I will say, and I didn't really catch this when I first took these out of the box, this tongue is pretty thick, and I have mentioned before that sometimes I feel that being a heavier composition can contribute to a little bit of temperature fluctuations from my experience, and I did see that a little bit. It just was too thick for me. It wasn't even that comfortable, and I will say that kind of a combination of that tongue of the shoe and this part right through here, this, depending on my striking pattern, sometimes pressed a little bit up into the curvature of the front of my ankle. And that was a little bit bothersome. It didn't continue during the entire run, so I don't know if I were to do a very lengthy run, if I would run into any issues or if it would just break over time. I had to retie these shoes a couple times to get the right lockdown I was looking for because there was so much material in that tongue that I like couldn't get it tight. But once I got them on, they were fine. I did find these to fit pretty true to size. I will say, typical Brooks fashion, they do run a tiny bit narrow. Having more narrow feet myself, it wasn't too much of an issue, but I do believe that longer runs, I would start to feel some irritation. But I do feel with longer runs, I would maybe have a little more rubbing than I would be comfortable with, especially if you're trying to avoid any kind of bunion situation developing. I did feel that that was on the inside of my feet, especially my left foot, that was maybe going to be an issue. Not uncomfortable, not painful, just thinking that constant friction in general over a long period of time is probably not ideal. For my pace range for these, I did go in between an 8-minute and a 9-minute mile. I really wanted to kind of scale it back a little bit, not just because it was hard for me to keep a faster pace and get my breathing under control, but mostly because this to me is going to be more of those long run, recovery run shoe styles. And I do feel that it performed best the slower I went. It did have some fun responsiveness that I had anticipated, but it's sometimes hard to feel that reflected at those slower paces. And I did feel that these did do that. When I picked up the pace in these, I found it to be dissipating a little bit the faster I would go. I did try a couple little pushes into that high 7-minute mile pace range, and it didn't really do a whole lot for me. This is a pretty heavy shoe. As we know, I mentioned it in the beginning, and it did feel pretty heavy. I was happy that we had some technology in here that could drive me forward regardless of the weight. However, it's not one that I would be able to pick up the pace in for long periods of time. I did feel weighed down, not sinking and weighed down. The foam was great. Did really have a good time in that, but weighed down just due to the fact that they are too heavy for my liking. The traction overall in these was solid across the board. I had no complaints here. Don't feel that anyone will think differently here. The upper was quite a bit more breathable, I think, than the first iteration. And that was something that they were looking to achieve. I was very happy with this. I really don't have anything that I would change in terms of the material composition. I would say just widening up the shoe a teeny bit, but I feel that way with all Brooks shoes. I feel that they all could just go a tiny bit wider and have a little bit more of a wide foot friendly toe box for more people. And I think their shoes would be amazing. Let's go ahead and get into the ratings here because I think it's about that time. So let's start with quality. This shoe overall is a pretty high quality shoe. I don't really have anything that I would change in terms of quality. I think it's going to last a long time. I would give this a 9.2. I felt that this foam was solid. Was not shocked there because the first iteration had great foam too. I feel that this, for what it's meant to do, it's got a great makeup here and it's going to serve people who are looking to do a solid recovery run or maybe just a more leisurely long run. The upper, big fan of the upper. I do feel that they made some, I don't feel that it needed that much improving in my opinion from the first one, but they did something. And I think that this is great overall. I do feel that even though there's more material with the shoe, which typically can lead to you running on the hotter side, I feel that this is breathable. I think that they did an awesome job and it's very malleable. Don't think that anyone's going to have any issues with that. Shoelaces, they're average. It doesn't impact the quality of the overall shoe and the performance components here. But I mean, I don't really love this style shoelace. It's just like a round barrel style shoelace, kind of thicker. Kind of reminds me of like the shoelaces you would wear with your elementary school Skechers. Don't know if I'm dating myself here, but regardless, that's just kind of what I feel with this. It doesn't feel very performance-based. Price point. $200 US, max cushion shoe. It's pretty common. I mean, I have reviewed a couple that were a lower price point, but I've also reviewed a couple that were a higher price point. I'm gonna go ahead and give this a 9.1. I think for this shoe in particular, it's a pretty solid shoe overall. And given that again, most Max cushion shoes seem to fall in that range. I think it's fair. I still feel that these should not be $200 shoes, but for the quality and all the other things that go into it, I think it's pretty spot on. Performance. I will say that this is a 9.3. I was overall pretty happy with how this performed. I feel that it did really well at those slower paces, but continuing to drive me forward, which is what you need if you're going to be going on a longer run. You want a shoe that's going to continue to propel you forward, and this did do that. Because of the weight, I don't know that I would love it that long of a distance, but that's a personal thing. Not anything to do with the shoe's performance overall. The foam really did a great job with that nitrogen DNA infused composition here. I feel that that did give some really nice pep to it for a Max Cushion daily trainer. Like I said, when I picked up the pace, it didn't really do a whole lot for me, but that's not what it's meant for. When I test a shoe, I like to test it at all different paces so that I can kind of speak to my experience regardless of what the website and my different resources say it can do. But it's one that I think people are going to have a hard time finding coming to life too much when you're going a lot faster, primarily due to the weight. It did thrive at like a nice zone 2 relaxing run. Comfort. I'm going to go ahead and give these an 8.9. It was weird because I found these to be ebbing and flowing in comfort. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced that. That seems like a very unusual way to describe a shoe. But my initial thoughts when I put them on is they felt comfortable. When I started the run, they felt comfortable. Then I found a little bit of firmness kind of kicking in, and then slightly due to maybe how narrow it was, I found it to be a tiny bit annoying, more than uncomfortable really, or painful at this point in my run. Now, again, if I ran longer, I do think there could have been some pain issues due to how narrow it was, but I felt like that was just impacting me a tiny bit, but then it would go through and kind of turn around, and now a certain pace maybe I would hit. I'm like, okay, this is starting to feel comfortable again. Then it would be a little bit firm or a little bit rubby. So it's not bad, but it wasn't my favorite in terms of comfort. It ebbed and it flowed, which is just so funny because I feel like it's, for me, most shoes are pretty consistent across the board. Once I get into a run, it's not going to change that much. Interested to see if anyone else has similar experiences with shoes or this shoe in particular. So all that being said, is this a Thunderstruck shoe? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to say no, and a couple of reasons why I want to call out. Obviously, I've talked about everything up until this point. The main reasons for me why these are not a Thunderstruck shoe are, number one, the weight. I really struggle with heavy shoes. I can't comfortably run in shoes over the 8-ounce range. It just hasn't worked for me yet. Maybe one day it will. I just find that I am not comfortable over a long period of time. It's harder for me to turn over my legs. It's harder for me to be able to confidently run longer distances. It's just not my favorite thing in the world, and it's a personal preference at the end of the day. Number two, the reason for this is I did not love how narrow it was, though the upper, much more dialed in, very comfortable. It just was pushing against the outsides of my feet enough where if I were going out and running double-digit miles, I think that it would be uncomfortable, and I feel that there would be some rubbing irritation coming up that I would not enjoy. And I think that if you do tend to have wider feet, it's going to impact you. All in all, I don't think this is a bad shoe by any means. As you heard from the ratings, it rated pretty high in my opinion. It just wasn't something that I would love long term, and that's okay. I want some components of this shoe, but I do want it to be lighter weight at the end of the day. That's the biggest thing, and a teeny bit more wide foot friendly so I can comfortably run longer distances. All right, I'm so curious, has anyone tried the Glycerin Max 2 yet? It is a brand new shoe. It's only been out for a couple weeks at this point, and if you have, did you like it more or less than the first iteration, or did you not try the first iteration at all? Let me know your thoughts, and let me know if there's another shoe you want me to try. Until next time, take care.